Shakespeare's Macbeth. In many ways it is extraordinary that we're here today still studying, watching and enjoying this play, set as it was nearly 1,000 years ago in a completely different world. In the 11th century, when this play is set, religious belief, agriculture and class hierarchies would have been far more relevant to those of us now living in the 21st century. An Elizabethan audience watching the play being performed for the first time, and newly invigorated by the opportunities of trade and manufacturing industries, would also recognise a different world. So what is it about Shakespeare's Macbeth that has ensured it has stood the test of time? One factor is the character of Macbeth himself. All of us can identify with the concept of a flawed hero. Someone ambitious like many of us, someone with a conscience, hopefully like all of us, but someone who, unlike us, ultimately commits multiple acts of murder. His conscience is shown clearly in the soliloquy from Act 1, Scene 7. He ponders that Duncan's virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued, against the deep damnation of his taking off. The reference to angels in a simile show Macbeth's understanding that actually Duncan is a good man, someone whose qualities align him with heaven, and as such someone who doesn't deserve to be killed. Macbeth emphasises Duncan's goodness in the alliterative phrase trumpet-tongued. He is such a decent, honourable king that his virtues should be shouted out, loud and clear, like trumpets. Once Shakespeare has enabled the audience to identify with Macbeth's humanity, we can pity his suffering following his killing of Duncan, even though of course he is now a murderer. The start of his mental disintegration, as compelling to modern audience as Shakespearean ones, is shown in Act 2, Scene 2. He cries out to his wife, "Methought I heard a voice cry, sleep no more. Macbeth, does murder sleep, the innocent sleep?" The merging of subject and verb in methought is not only typically Shakespearean, but also implies Macbeth is beginning to lose control. He can no longer clearly command his sentences with a self-affirming I as the first word. The use of emotive phrases such as innocent sleep, does murder sleep, arguably achieve the impossible, help the audience identify and sympathise with a killer. Every human being understands the importance of sleep and rest for one's health and sanity, and fully comprehends the catastrophic consequences of a loss of sleep. So Macbeth as a character clearly has huge potential for multimodal transformation. Nowadays, dramas involving murders continue to be hugely popular. How many of us have enjoyed watching him? Her? As well as modern adaptations of classics, including him. So of course Macbeth's combination of humanity and brutality, for example he unseen an enemy from the nave to the chaps and fixed his head on some battlements in Act 1 Scene 2, make compelling viewing in any format and for any generation. The Australian director of the gory Romper Stomper film, Wright, clearly agreed. Romper Stomper was released in 1992 and quickly developed a cult following. Here's a taster.
We came to wreck everything.
Many might wonder why the director of such a gory, violent, controversial film might want to take on Shakespeare. Indeed, initial reviews were mixed to say the least. Comments range from The Guardian's Peter Bradshaw's scathing, "It's a deeply pointless adaptation of Macbeth, in which the original play is transferred to modern gangland, perhaps the biggest cliché imaginable," to a more positive review from Michael Ideto, writing in The Age, in which he describes it as a crisp, vital reinvention of some of Shakespeare's most compelling story. Wright set his Macbeth in the Australian underworld. Duncan is the boss of a criminal gang, whilst Macbeth is one of his brutal henchmen. This transformation causes immediate problems. Can a modern audience empathise in the same way with a gang member, hugely fond of drugs and material items, who decides to kill his boss? In a similar way, can a modern audience sympathise so much with a slaughtered crime baron? Almost certainly not. Further problems emerge with a closer focus on the respective texts. In Act 1, Scene 4 of Shakespeare's original, Duncan thanks both Banquo and Macbeth for the magnificent fighting, leadership and loyalty whilst repelling rebellious forces and an invading Norwegian army. He cries to Macbeth, "O worthiest cousin, the sin of my ingratitude even now was heavy on me. Thou art so far before that swing of recompense is slow to overtake thee." The use of superlatives, worthiest and swiftest, clearly show that Duncan, the Scottish king, is not afraid to praise his captains and give ample praise where it is due. He even uses the word sin, religious imagery, to show how strongly Duncan feels about congratulating Macbeth. It is against God not to thank him sufficiently for his loyal service to king and country. The imagery of the swiftest wing continues the theme of a noble king being sufficiently humble as to praise others, suggesting that flying speed is metaphorically necessary to catch up with Macbeth's awesome bravery. Therefore, when Macbeth does kill Duncan, even though the audience dramatically engage with the former and empathise to a certain extent with his dilemma, they also feel a sense of outrage at such an unjust act of regicide. However, as alluded to earlier, in Wright's film version, there is no regicide, the killing of a king. Duncan does come across with a certain sense of dignity, as seen in his older age, snow-white hair and slick three-piece suits. But that doesn't change the fact he is a hardened criminal. Furthermore, close comparison between Shakespeare's and Wright's texts show that the drugs baron Duncan loses some of the original Duncan's nobility in his language. Whereas in Shakespeare's original, there is a dignified, courtly graciousness in Duncan's use of superlatives and complimentary imagery. In Wright's version, the focus is on fewer thanks and sordid material gain. In addition to Shakespeare's original, Wright's Duncan directly anoints Macbeth Thane of Cawdor with his verb of greeting hail, ominously echoing the witch's words and therefore foreshadowing his own death, before stating,
"What you see is your domain, bestowed now to you with bonding love."
Whereas King Duncan is able to award Macbeth a title heavily dependent on the class hierarchy of the period, Druggan Baron Duncan uses the noun domain and the determiner your to highlight the fact that Wright's world is a materialistic one, where possessions are far more important than honourable titles. In the film, being made Thane of Cawdor simply means that you are now either the manager or the owner of the Cawdor, a rather tawdry, grubby nightclub in which earlier in the film, Macbeth and Banquo spent some time quaffing whiskey and snorting drugs under darkened lights. Here they are in action. Drugs Baron Duncan does use the noun phrase bonding love to hint at some emotional attachment to Macbeth, but this is betrayed by the abruptness of the exchange and the fact Macbeth is given very little opportunity to voice his own comments. At this stage of the movie at least, Duncan clearly is not interested in building a genuine relationship with his, loyal to this point, shooting superstar. So clearly a great deal is lost in Wright's transformation. The nobility of members of the Scottish aristocracy is replaced by sharp-suited and ruthless criminals. The mutually respectful relationship between a king and an honourable captain is replaced with an issuance of instructions and going through the motions thank yous. However, that is not to say that Wright's transformation is unsuccessful in all respects. Take the character of Lady Macbeth for example. In Shakespeare's original play, she twists her femininity to devastating effect in order to stir up sufficient evil inside her to work with her husband to kill the king. In her famous soliloquy of Act 1, Scene 5, she beseeches, "Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here, and fill me from the crown to the toe top full of direst cruelty." The imperative verb come shows the urgency of Lady Macbeth's desire to be infiltrated with evil thoughts. She will not wait for evil to come to her, she demands that it comes. Whilst the extraordinary verb unsex calls for her to be shorn of the traditional female qualities of nurturing, loving and kindness, as symbolised in the act of mother bearing and caring for a child. This would have been deeply shocking to a conservative Elizabethan world, in which women had limited opportunities outside the home. It remains deeply shocking to modern audiences too. So Shakespeare in Macbeth is questioning and challenging traditional stereotypes of femininity and what it means to be both a man and a woman. Wright takes this theme and develops it in his production. He uses all of Shakespeare's original unsex line, quoted above, let's take a look at how it's played.
Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts, unsex me here, and fill me from the crown to the toe top full of direst cruelty.
In terms of language, the potential pun on crown, meaning not just the top of one's head, but also the circular decoration for the head worn by a king or queen, is lost as the Macbeths are aiming to become gang chiefs rather than monarchs. However, this section of the film is devastatingly effective in other ways. Immediately prior to Lady Macbeth coming outside to call to the spirits, the camera shows an extreme close-up of a maid carving pink meat with a sharp knife, foreshadowing Macbeth's later murderous stabs to Duncan's heart. Once outside, sound effects are used. The viewer hears faint thunder in the distance, reflecting the evil that is to come via pathetic fallacy. There is also an eerie, creaking sound, which catches Lady Macbeth's eye. As Lady Macbeth looks at the swing, the camera is held close up on her face, showing her facial expressions in detail. Her eyes are slightly watery, while she swallows as if to repress hidden emotions. Clearly in Wright's film, the presence of the toddler swing points to a tragic loss of a child earlier in her life, one which possibly has left her mentally scarred and more prone to irrational ambitions and evil desires. This idea is backed up within Shakespeare's text, albeit within the rather alarming context of Lady Macbeth giving reasons why her husband should commit murder. She reveals in Act 1, Scene 7, "I've given suck, and know how tender 'tis to love the babe that milks me." However, as no child is present in the play, the assumption is that Lady Macbeth has lost a baby in possibly tragic circumstances. Wright develops this idea explicitly at the beginning of the film, when he shows the three witches at a graveyard where the Macbeths have a child buried. The camera shows a long shot of Lady Macbeth crying bitterly, with Macbeth standing quietly in the background. The fact the witches and the Macbeths are first seen in the same setting within seconds of each other links them inexorably together and seems to indicate that the death of a child is a key motivating factor to the pair being so easily tempted by three impish schoolgirls as the witches are depicted in the film.